I had always thought of my mom's house as a sanctuary, a place where, no matter what, I could come home, kick back, and find some peace. It wasn't much, just a small, modest house in the suburbs, but it was home. Or at least, it used to be. For the longest time, I had a routine: work, study, and then spend my weekends lounging in the comfort of my childhood room. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a quiet rhythm that suited me. My mom was always around, busy with her garden or cooking, and I'd find her in the kitchen every time I'd walk in. It was a little cozy, predictable life. But recently, things have started to shift. It all started with the friend. Her friend, actually. I can't say I knew much about her, but from what I had gathered, she wasn't exactly my mom's best choice in company. You know the type. Always chirping about how good her life is, telling my mom what to do, and always trying to inject herself into everything. I was fine keeping my distance, but that became impossible when she and her kids started staying over. It started off small, an extra plate at dinner or a sleeping bag rolled out on the living room floor. But over time, it grew into something bigger. Her kids started wandering into my room, touching my things and playing with my stuff as if it was theirs. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to stir the pot or make a big deal out of it. But little by little, my privacy started feeling like it was slipping away. One evening, I came home after a long day of work to find her kids sitting on my bed, watching TV. I didn't even get a chance to say anything before they gave me that look. The "oh, you're home" look. It wasn't out of malice, but more out of a complete lack of awareness. They just didn't get it. But what really made me snap wasn't that. It was the day my mom casually told me that I should start paying rent. Rent. That word hit me harder than I expected. I mean, I was still their child, the same one who used to run around the house in socks, too small for their shoes, asking for help with their homework. Suddenly, everything felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something in the air had changed. I didn't know what was going on, what had shifted between me and my mom, or what exactly she was thinking. But I felt like I was being squeezed out of a space I once belonged to. And when she dropped that bomb about the rent, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Was this really what it had come to? I couldn't understand why she would ask me to pay rent when her friends' kids were essentially living in my space. It didn't make sense. I think that's when I began to feel the first stirrings of real conflict. It wasn't just about the rent. It wasn't even about the kids or her friend, really. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of being pushed out, of no longer being a part of my mom's world in the same way. And that's when I realized I had to make a choice. Either I could sit back and accept things the way they were, or I could leave. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the first domino to fall in a chain of events that would change everything. I spent the next few days in a fog, my thoughts spiraling. The rent thing kept nagging at me. Was I being unreasonable? It's not like my mom asked for much, but it was the principle of it. She had been my rock, my safe place, and now she was suddenly asking me to pay to stay under the same roof. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I didn't want to be that person who got all defensive, but I couldn't help but feel like she was treating me like I was just another tenant in her house. I mean, what was next? Would she start charging me for food? For the air I breathed? It felt wrong. And the worst part? I could tell she didn't think much of it. She was so casual about it, like it was no big deal, like I was just another adult in the house. I kept telling myself to calm down. It's just rent, right? But it wasn't just rent. It was about respect. It was about family. My mom and I had always been close. Too close, maybe. But over the past few months, I felt like we were slipping further apart. Then came the day I found out something I wasn't supposed to know. I was in my room, minding my business, when I heard my mom on the phone in the living room. She wasn't being quiet, not that she ever was, but I overheard her talking about me, and it wasn't exactly flattering. She's getting older, you know, needs to learn responsibility, my mom said, her voice casual, like she was talking about the weather. I think it's time she paid rent, don't you? And then her so-called friend, chimed in. Yeah, she's in her 20s now. It's only fair. I mean, she's living here rent-free while your friend's kids have to contribute." I was frozen. I didn't move. My chest felt tight, like someone had squeezed all the air out of my lungs. It wasn't what they said, it was how they said it. The casualness, the lack of concern, as if they were talking about a stranger, as if I wasn't even a part of the conversation. I don't know what hurt more, the fact that my mom thought it was time for me to pay rent, or that her friend was playing such a large role in the decisions of my life. And that's when I realized what I was really upset about. I didn't have a say anymore. I wasn't just upset about rent or about the kids invading my space. I was upset because my mom wasn't treating me like her daughter anymore. I was just another adult in the house. That's when the conflict inside me started to boil over. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. But where could I go? I didn't want to cut ties with my mom. I didn't want to make things worse. But I also couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The next morning, I did the only thing I could think of. I packed my bags. I didn't tell my mom. I just left. I needed space. I needed time to figure out what had gone wrong. And as soon as I slammed the door behind me, I felt this heavy weight lift off my shoulders. But it was a bittersweet feeling. I wasn't sure if I had made the right choice. All I knew was I couldn't stay under that roof any longer, not with the tension growing thicker every day. It wasn't until I started driving away that I realized something. I had never really left home before. Sure, I'd gone away for college and work, but I'd always come back. Now I was just gone. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was never really coming back. Not to the same home anyway. I had no plan, no clear idea of where I was going. I just needed distance, time to think, and to breathe, without feeling like everything I did was being scrutinized by my mom or her friend. I ended up at a small apartment complex I'd passed a million times on my way to work. I'd never even noticed it before, but now it felt like the perfect place. Quiet, anonymous, and far from everything that had been weighing me down. The first couple of days were weird. I kept waiting for a call from my mom, but it didn't come. I thought she might be mad at me. Hell, I thought I might be mad at her. But as the days passed, I realized that there was this strange, quiet comfort in the distance. I could finally think without hearing her voice or seeing her friends' kids running through my space. I told myself I'd reach out soon, but deep down, I knew something had changed. It wasn't just about the rent anymore. There was more. The air between us had shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. That's when I got the text. It wasn't from my mom, though. It was from her friend. It was simple. "We're worried about you. Please come home. Talk to your mom." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keys. Part of me wanted to respond, tell her exactly what I thought about her meddling. But another part of me hesitated. Was I really going to let this woman control my life too? It was like she had her hands in everything. She was the reason my mom was suddenly asking me to pay rent, and I hated the idea that she was making decisions for us. But despite my frustration, the pull of home was undeniable. I could feel my mind racing. Should I go back? What was I going to say to my mom? Was there any way to fix this? I ended up going back, but it wasn't what I expected. When I walked through the door, it was like I was walking into a stranger's house. The atmosphere was off. My mom and her friend were sitting in the living room, quietly talking. The kids were nowhere to be seen, which was oddly unsettling. "Mom?" I said, my voice unsteady. She looked up, but there was no warmth in her eyes. No, "Hey, how's everything going?" or "I've missed you." Just a blank stare. Her friend quickly chimed in. "It's good to see you again. We're glad you came back." I couldn't stand it. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation for everything. But instead, I just sat there, too tired to fight. And that's when my mom said something I didn't expect. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady but distant, "about everything." I could feel the weight of her words, the silence hanging heavy in the air. It was like she was preparing to deliver some sort of ultimatum. But I couldn't tell what. I felt like a child again, sitting at the table, waiting for the grown-ups to tell me what I was doing wrong. "We've been talking," my mom continued, looking over at her friend, "about the situation, About you. It was the way she said it that sent a chill through me. About me. I glanced at her friend. Something in the way she was watching me made my skin crawl. She had that look in her eyes. The kind of look people get when they think they know more than you do. I knew something was off. This wasn't just about me staying rent-free anymore. There was something deeper, something I wasn't being told, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. "You've been keeping secrets from me," my mom said suddenly, her voice quieter now, almost as if she was trying to avoid saying it too loudly. I blinked. "What do you mean?" She looked at her friend before answering, as if she needed reassurance. "You've been keeping things from me, important things." Her voice trembled now, just a little. I didn't know what to say. I felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. What could I possibly be hiding? I hadn't even been here for a week, and I hadn't had any time to do anything, let alone keep secrets. Her friend leaned forward. "She's talking about the fact that you've been planning to move out, haven't you? You were already looking for places before this whole thing, with the rent even started. You've been making all these plans behind our backs." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. It took a moment for my brain to process what was being said. But then the truth started to unfold. She had been the one to suggest the rent idea to my mom. She'd planted the seed, and my mom, well, she had just gone along with it. My mom wasn't asking for rent because she needed it. She was asking for rent because her friend told her to. I stood up, my pulse pounding in my ears. "This isn't about the rent, is it?" I demanded. "You've been trying to force me out for months, haven't you?" My mom's eyes flickered, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something. Guilt? Shame? I couldn't tell, but it was there, just for a second, before she looked away. "That's not true," she said softly, but the words felt hollow. It all clicked in that moment. The rent, the sudden coldness between us, her friend's influence. It was all part of a bigger game. I wasn't just some adult child living in her house anymore. I was a pawn in whatever twisted relationship they had formed behind my back. I was done. Done with the manipulation. Done with the secrets. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. "For good." And I meant it. I didn't even wait for a response. I didn't care if they tried to talk me down or convince me to stay. There was no way I was sticking around to let my mom or her friend control my life any longer. I grabbed my bag, turned on my heel, and headed straight for the door. "Wait," my mom called after me, her voice barely a whisper, but it was too late. I had already stepped outside, and the cool night air hit me like a slap. It felt so much better than the suffocating tension inside that house. I stood there for a second, trying to steady my breath, trying to make sense of everything. My mind was racing, thoughts tumbling over each other. My heart was pounding, not just from the anger, but from the realization that I was finally leaving. And I wasn't sure if I was ever going back. I heard the door open behind me, but I didn't turn around. I wasn't ready to face her yet, not after everything. But my mom stepped out and called my name again, louder this time. "Katie, please." I froze. Her voice, usually full of warmth and comfort, sounded thin, strained. It was the kind of voice you hear when someone's trying to hold on to something slipping through their fingers. I almost turned around, almost stepped back into the chaos of that house. But I couldn't. I couldn't let myself get pulled back in. "I'm done, Mom," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "You don't get to treat me like this anymore. I'm not a kid, and I'm not your pawn in whatever game you're playing with your friend." There was silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe she would argue. Maybe she'd tell me I was overreacting, or that I misunderstood. But instead, I heard her let out a deep breath. She didn't say anything at first, and for the first time in a long time, I wondered if she really did get it. "Katie," my mom's voice cracked. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted any of this?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. I knew she didn't want to hurt me. I knew she didn't mean to push me away, but her actions had spoken louder than her words for so long. And her silence now only made it worse. She wasn't fighting for me. She wasn't begging me to stay. She was just resigned. I don't know what you want from me, I said, turning to face her. But I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. I was shaking, but I was angry too. Angry at her for letting it get this far. Angry at myself for being so blind to the things I didn't want to see. I wanted to say more, so much more. But the words got stuck in my throat. What was the point of it? We were past the point of trying to fix it. The damage had already been done. She took a step forward, her eyes welling up with tears. Katie, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this way. I never wanted to hurt you. And I just looked at her. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I could also see something else. Something I didn't recognize. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. But it wasn't the love I had grown up with. The love I'd always depended on. It wasn't enough anymore. I shook my head slowly. I'm done with the lies, Mom. I'm done with being manipulated. You and your friend, whatever it is you two have going on, I can't be a part of it. I just can't. For a second, I thought she was going to say something more, but she didn't. She just stood there, looking at me with that mixture of regret and helplessness. I could see it in her face. She didn't know how to fix it. She didn't know how to fix us. I turned away from her and walked down the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest. But this time, I didn't look back. I got into my car, slammed the door shut, and started the engine. My hands were still trembling, my mind still spinning with everything that had just happened. But as I drove away, I felt something else. It was a mixture of fear and relief. Fear of what was happening between us. Fear of what had happened, but also relief. Relief that I was finally taking control of my own life. I didn't know where I was going next. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I couldn't let my mom, or anyone, dictate my life for me. Not anymore. But as I drove away, I couldn't help but think of everything that had led up to this moment. The small, seemingly insignificant decisions that had built up into this. The rent, the kids in my room, the silence, the secrets, and I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever be able to fix what was broken between us. I didn't know the answer, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally free to figure it out on my own. The days that followed were a blur. I spent them in that apartment, pacing around in circles, trying to find some sense of clarity in the mess I had left behind. I thought time would give me answers, but all it did was leave me with more questions. What had I really accomplished by walking away? Did I make the right choice? Could I ever repair the relationship with my mom? I didn't reach out to her. I didn't know how to. There was this wall now, this invisible barrier between us that I didn't know how to break. I had never been good at confrontation, at expressing my feelings without getting overwhelmed. I had always taken the easier route, keeping my head down, letting things slide. But this time things were different. This time, I couldn't ignore the hurt, the anger, the sense of betrayal that had built up between us. A week passed. No phone calls, no texts. I kept checking my phone, but nothing, not even from her friend. And it stung, honestly. Part of me had hoped that my mom would come to her senses, that she'd realize how much I meant to her, that she'd beg me to come back. But the silence was deafening. I started questioning myself. Did she really care? Was I just a burden to her, something she was trying to push out of her life? Or was it just that her friend's influence was so powerful that she couldn't see what was happening to us? I wasn't sure, but what I did know was that I couldn't keep waiting around for her to fix things. I had to fix myself first. I spent the next few days reflecting on everything, on my childhood, on our relationship, on all the things we had never talked about. And slowly, bit by bit, I began to heal. I knew that whatever happened between me and my mom, I couldn't let it define me. I had to rebuild my own life, with or without her. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look at it, but something told me this was it. I was either going to hear from her or never hear from her again. I took a deep breath, unlocked the screen, and saw her name. It was a text. "Can we talk?" My heart stopped. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, not knowing what to do. I had been waiting for this moment, hoping for it, But now that it was here, I wasn't sure I was ready. I stared at the screen, torn between my need for closure and my fear of being hurt again. I knew that talking wouldn't make everything go back to the way it was. I knew that the silence, the distance, had already changed us. But I also knew that if I didn't at least hear her out, I'd never have peace. I wrote back, my fingers trembling. "I'm not sure I'm ready, but I'll listen." A few minutes later, she called. I almost didn't pick up. I was afraid of what her voice would do to me, of what hearing her again might stir up. But I pressed accept anyway, and as soon as I heard her voice, I felt the weight of everything I'd been carrying come crashing down. "Katie, I don't know where to begin," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I've been thinking about everything, and I realize I've made a mess of things. I'm so sorry for pushing you away, and I'm sorry for letting anyone get in between us." I stayed quiet, trying to steady my breath. It was hard to take it all in, to process her apology. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was a start. I should have listened to you. I should have seen the way you were feeling. I was so wrapped up in everything, in trying to make things work with her, that I didn't see how much I was hurting you, she continued. "I'm sorry. I really am." I didn't know what to say. There were so many emotions inside me: anger, confusion, sorrow. But the thing that hit me hardest was how much I wanted things to be different. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. "You've hurt me, Mom," I said, my voice raw. "But I don't want this to be the end. I don't want to walk away from you completely." There was a long pause on the other end, and then I heard her quietly sobbing. It broke my heart. But I also knew that this was the first time in a long time that she was showing me real emotion. She wasn't hiding behind excuses or pretending like everything was fine. "I've been selfish," she whispered. "I never meant to make you feel this way. I just wanted things to be easy. I didn't know how to handle you growing up. I didn't know how to let you go." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was hearing the truth. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying. And for that, I could forgive her. I think we both need some time," I said softly. "But we can figure this out, right?" "I hope so," she said, her voice shaking. "I really hope so." Story 2. The narrative, Exposed, tells about my aunt's and cousin's romance with their partner during her birthday celebration. Hello everyone. I've been spending a lot of time locating these tales for you, and the channel has been a little sluggish lately. Please click the subscribe button if you like the article. It keeps this adventure going strong and means the world. Together, let's develop. Let's begin the video now. OP begins by stating that although my cousin Lily's 21st birthday party was intended to be a lighthearted celebration, it ended up becoming an unforgettable event. The whole family was invited to her parents' house, which was large enough to fit everyone. I got to see the majority of the family when they entered because my mom insisted that we come early to assist with setup. At first, everyone was rushing around, catching up, and laughing, creating a happy environment. My Aunt Sarah, a 46-year-old recent divorcee, was one of the last to arrive. The family's golden kid has always been Sarah. Despite the fact that my grandparents love her, she always finds a way to put herself first. Regardless of the event, she entered with her typical assurance and greeted everyone as though she were the main attraction. I saw something strange when Sarah got to Lily and her boyfriend, Ryan. Her embrace with Ryan was unique. It wasn't only a friendly greeting. She stayed a little too long, and her grin seemed strange. It made me uneasy, but I didn't say anything at the moment. As usual, the celebration went on. Groups of guests were conversing, laughing, and eating. Lily was content as she reveled in the attention and celebrated her significant birthday. They all gathered and sung happy birthday when it was time to cut the cake. For a time, everything seemed normal, and it was a wonderful moment. Then Sarah came to me and asked for a favor. She asked if I may snap photographs of the celebration and gave me her phone. "I'm not nearly as good at this as you are." She laughed as she spoke. As I was taking pictures, I didn't mind lending a hand because I don't like being in shots. Her phone displayed a notice. It lighted up directly in front of me, and even though I didn't plan to stare, it was difficult to ignore. The message said, "I can't wait until the party is over," and it came from a person called Ryan. I felt sick to my stomach. Before I could stop myself, I clicked on the notice, and my pulse raced at what I saw. With references to sneaking off together and heart emoticons, the communications were flirtatious. For several minutes, I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I simply stood there attempting to interpret it. Is it a coincidence, perhaps? Could there have been another Ryan? But I knew the truth in my heart. The hug, the messages, it all added up before. Shortly after, Sarah yelled at Ryan to assist her in carrying Lily's present from the car. She fussed about it, claiming that it required two persons and was heavy. Though I couldn't get rid of the impression that something wasn't quite right, everyone in the room thought it was a considerate gesture. I made the decision to follow them, keeping a safe distance behind them to avoid their attention. I entered the backyard after going outdoors. By Sarah's vehicle, I noticed them. Even though the light was poor, I could still see them well. They weren't only standing. They were sharing a kiss. It wasn't a fleeting kiss or a careless lip kiss. The kiss was intense and passionate. I froze for a moment as my breath caught in my throat. Then I realized I was holding my phone. I shakily took a picture while my hands were shaking. Before they could see me, I rushed back inside. My thoughts were racing. What ought I to do? Should I wait to tell Lily or tell her now? I wanted to confront Sarah and Ryan right away, but I didn't want to start a commotion before I had any evidence. For the remainder of the evening, I watched them from the other side of the room. A few minutes later, they returned inside, laughing and behaving as if nothing had happened. My blood boiled at the audacity of it. I finally reached a breaking point. I had to tell Lily. I knew she was entitled to know. I also couldn't sit there and act like nothing was wrong. I drew her aside into the kitchen when it was my turn to present her with my gift. I murmured softly, "I have to show you something, Lily." She gave me an inquisitive glance. She noticed the look on my face and her grin faded. I showed her the photo and gave her my phone. She paled and gazed at the television for what seemed like an eternity. Is this authentic?" Her voice trembled as she whispered. I gave a nod. "Lily, I'm very sorry. I couldn't hide it from you, but I didn't want you to learn about it in this way." She returned the phone to me with trembling hands. Then she raced into the living room without another word. I went with her. I had no idea what was about to happen. She approached Sarah and Ryan directly, her voice shaking with rage. "How could you harm me like this?" she shouted while displaying the photo on her phone. There was silence in the room. When the tension got intolerable, everyone's attention was drawn to them. Sarah's face contorted into a phony look of surprise. "Sweetheart, what are you talking about?" Her tone was brimming with pretended innocence as she questioned. Lily refused to give up. "This." She shoved the phone in Sarah's face and yelled, "Describe this." Ryan's face flushed as he stammered. "It is not what it appears to be." Weakly, he said, "There was only one kiss. Just one kiss," Lily yelled. "Do you believe that makes it acceptable?" Sarah intervened, raising the pitch of her voice. "Calm down, Lily. You're creating a commotion." That wasn't the case. Lily, however, would not have it. "You're my aunt. How could you harm me like this?" Chaos broke out in the room. While Sarah continued to deny everything, others were shouting and attempting to calm Lily. Ryan had the appearance of wanting to vanish, refusing to speak again. The celebration eventually ended in disarray. We learned all we needed to know about Ryan's loyalty when he departed with Sarah. I couldn't help but experience a range of emotions as I departed with my folks. Rage at Ryan and Sarah for their treachery, a persistent sensation of shame for being the one to reveal everything, along with sadness for Lily. I had no idea that this was only the start. I woke up to complete commotion in the family group chat the morning after Lily's birthday celebration. Everyone was chiming in on what had transpired, and messages were flowing back and forth. The majority of the family was aware of the altercation, but the specifics were already beginning to change. Sarah and Ryan infuriated several individuals. Others felt I had done a bad job of handling it. Before I'd even had my coffee, I wasn't prepared for the barrage of viewpoints. My mother entered the kitchen, her expression tense with annoyance. "I got a call from Sarah." Flatly, she said. I gave an eye roll. "I'll guess. She is acting like the victim. She claims you wrecked Lily's birthday and made her seem bad in front of everyone." As though she was waiting for me to confess to some serious transgression, Mom answered. "Lily's birthday was ruined." I nearly choked on my toast as I fired back. "The scene where she was making out with Lily's boyfriend, perhaps? Or is that not relevant?" Mom's side seemed uneasy. "Just saying. Perhaps you might have held off on bringing it up until after the party. The day was meant to be joyful." I put down my coffee because I was becoming impatient. "So you believe that when Sarah and Ryan continued to slink about, I should have just smiled and pretended nothing was wrong?" Lily was entitled to the truth, and she was entitled to it immediately. I could tell Mom wasn't pleased with my response, even though she didn't reply. It was all okay. She didn't make me happy either. Lily, meantime, was having trouble taking it all in. Later that day, she texted me to say she felt overwhelmed, but thanked me for informing her. She wrote, "I feel like I don't even know who Ryan is anymore. How could he harm me like this?" And I attempted to console her, with Sarah, of all people. But in a circumstance like that, what do you even say? "All of this is not your fault," I answered. "Both of them made self-centered decisions. You're worthy of better than that." She informed me that she had spent the whole night mentally reliving everything, in an attempt to determine whether she had overlooked any clues. There were times in the past that seemed strange. She mentioned how Sarah would always come up with reasons to spend time with us, even when they didn't make sense. But I didn't think. She's my aunt, after all. I was at a loss for words. Finding out someone you trusted had been cheating on you all along was a terrible experience. As if the mess wasn't enough, Ryan made the decision to contact Lily. In an attempt to defend himself, he texted her for a long time, saying that Sarah had cheated on him and that the kiss was an isolated incident. Lily gave me the message, and when she responded to him, I could feel the rage brewing in her voice. She wrote, "One-time mistake. How long have you been skulking about with my aunt? Please don't make fun of me by acting like this was an impromptu incident." Ryan's justifications exacerbated the situation. He refused to acknowledge anything more than what was already known, and he abandoned Lily after she insisted on seeing his phone. "What a coward he is," Lily stated during our subsequent conversation. "He would prove that if he truly had nothing to conceal. Nevertheless, he won't." That says it all. Naturally, Sarah wasn't keeping quiet either. It seems that she had been attempting to slant the tale in her favor by phoning half of the family. According to my sister, Sarah had contacted her in tears, expressing how misunderstood she felt. She said that none of this was her intention. After stating that, my sister attempted to minimize the situation by claiming that Lily and Ryan weren't that serious. I said, "Not that serious. They spent 5 years together. How is she able to maintain her composure while saying that? She is in a difficult situation." My sister answered, "She is attempting to portray herself as the victim, even though she is aware that she made a mistake." The family was rapidly being divided into two factions: those who sided with Lily and didn't want to interact with Sarah or Ryan any longer were on one side. This comprised me, a couple of relatives, and Lily's parents. Those attempting to defend Sarah, arguing that she had erred and wasn't deserving of expulsion, were on the opposing side. Sarah had the support of my grandparents. They even gave me a direct call to give me a lecture about how I had behaved badly during the party. "My grandma scolded you for airing your personal problems in front of everyone. Family affairs are best managed in private." Incredulous, I repeated in private, "You mean the years when Sarah secretly deceived Lily? Or is that not relevant?" My granddad added his voice. "Due to her divorce, Sarah is going through a difficult period. When we are vulnerable, we all make poor decisions. Poor decisions. I lost my temper. This was a wise decision. This treachery was well planned. Give up trying to justify her. After that, they didn't say much, but I knew that they wouldn't change their minds. Their favorite had always been Sarah, and they would stop at nothing to keep her safe. Lily, on the other hand, was beginning to make some difficult choices. She fully broke off communication with Sarah and Ryan by blocking them on all social media platforms. She said, "I don't care what excuses they come up with. I've finished both of them." She had to make a difficult decision, particularly with regards to Sarah. "Since my birth, she has been a part of my life." Lily spoke those words. She was someone I looked up to growing up, but now I feel ill just looking at her. I assured her that, despite the pain, she was doing morally. I stated that sometimes you have to prioritize yourself. It has nothing to do with cruelty. The goal is to keep your peace. I was exhausted at the end of the day. Keeping up with all the turmoil was draining, particularly when certain family members continued to attempt to blame me for revealing the truth. Nevertheless, I had no regrets about what I had done. Sarah and Ryan should not have misled Lily in the first place. If they had wished to escape the consequences, Lily deserved to know the truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on how rapidly things had gotten out of control. Instead of celebrating Lily's milestone, the celebration revealed the unpleasant realities that lie underneath our family's facade. And there was even more repercussions. The consequences of Sarah and Ryan's treachery extended beyond the family group chat. Relationships were changing in ways I hadn't expected. By the end of the week, it was evident that no turning back once teams had been chosen. Lily had stopped communicating with Ryan and Sarah altogether. She blacklisted them on social media, erased their phone numbers, and made it clear to everyone that she would not tolerate any justifications for their behavior. This was more than simply a breakup for her. It was about taking back her honor, following years of mistaken faith. She informed me over the phone that I had been with him for 5 years. There was steel underneath the tremors in her voice. 5 years, with the hope that we would create a future together, and he had been skulking about with her the entire time. It's unbelievable that I allowed them to make fun of me for so long. Didn't you allow them to accomplish anything? I gave a forceful response. They made the decision to deceive and turn on you. Don't hold yourself responsible for their scumbag actions. Lily let out a sigh. You know, I know you're correct, but it's difficult to avoid feeling foolish. I mean, how could I have missed this? I became even more irate with Sarah and Ryan after hearing the anguish in her voice. They did more than simply turn on her. They shattered her faith in those she believed to be her closest friends and family. Sarah was in full damage control mode, while Lily worked through her feelings. She had been phoning relatives constantly in an attempt to repair her image. According to my cousin Emma, Sarah contacted her twice in a single day, sobbing and begging for sympathy. She insists that she didn't intend for it to occur. What does that even mean? Emma said. How can one unintentionally continue a 3-year affair? She is only attempting to evade responsibility. She doesn't give a damn about what she done, I said. Her main concern is what other people think of her, now that it's public knowledge. Emma gave a nod. To be honest, I'm over her. She is insane if she believes she can weep her way out of this. Ryan, meantime, had been blocked by Lily and had gone radio quiet. He stopped going to family get-togethers and vanished from the group chat. I assumed he was probably keeping quiet in the hopes that the storm would pass. But Ethan, Lily's brother, had other plans. One afternoon, Ethan informed me. I met Ryan at the gym. When I challenged him, he attempted to pretend that he was the victim of the situation and apologized profusely. What was it he said? I inquired. He said that Sarah had deceived him. Ethan rolled his eyes in response. He asserted that he had no idea how to stop her from coming on to him. I laughed resentfully. Oh, please. To halt it, he had 3 years. He was well aware of his actions. Ethan gave a nod. That's right. I advised him to keep his distance from Lily because he was a coward. I didn't mean for it to happen, he repeated. Once more, it was the same worn-out justification Sarah had been making. The lack of effort they were making in their apologies was almost comical. The family remained sharply split. It was not surprised that my grandparents were strongly in Sarah's favor. She had always been viewed by them as the perfect child. During a heated phone discussion, my grandma responded, "She's still family. We must forgive her since everyone makes errors." She was not mistaken, she decided. I retorted, "She now has to deal with the fallout." My grandma sighed. "After all that she has done for you, you're just going to remove her out of your life?" That almost made me giggle. "She has done everything for me. What specifically has she done? Because all I see is someone who abdicated her responsibilities for betraying her own niece." Soon after, the call came to an end, with me refusing to back down and my grandma still standing up for Sarah. In contrast, Lily's parents were very supportive of her, even before the affair was made public. Her mother told me she had been upset with Sarah for years. She said that Sarah had always been self-centered. Although she has harmed family members before, this is by far the worst. Lily will never forgive her, in my opinion. I don't blame her, to be honest. I was relieved to hear that and know Lily had strong support. Having people who cared for her made a huge difference. Dealing with a betrayal like this was difficult enough. For my part, I was beginning to feel the pressure of being in the center. I had to cope with more than simply the consequences of Sarah and Ryan's behavior. In addition, I had to deal with the relatives who felt that I had gone too far in disclosing them. "You ought to have let Lily solve it herself." At a family meal, one of my uncles informed me, "You had no business getting involved." I glared at him. Therefore, I ought to have just sat back and let them to continue deceiving her. "I'm not that sort of person. I'm sorry." He gave a shrug. "Sometimes it's best to keep your mouth shut." I would have been complicit if I had kept my mouth shut. I gave a forceful response. The truth was something Lily deserved to know, and it's a shame if that causes discomfort to certain folks. The more I refused to back down, the more I understood who I could truly rely on in the family. One of my strongest supporters was my sister, who never stopped telling me that I had made the correct decision. "You reveal the truth," she remarked. "They're simply angry now. They cannot continue to act as though nothing is wrong." I remembered what she said. People found the truth to be unsettling, particularly when it exposed things they didn't want to acknowledge. However, I had no intention of apologizing for holding Ryan and Sarah responsible. Lily informed me at the conclusion of the week that she was beginning therapy in order to process her feelings. She added, "I don't want this to define who I am. I've expended enough energy on unworthy individuals." I was pleased that she had taken that action. After such a betrayal, it was difficult to repair, but she was resolved to emerge stronger. Ryan and Sarah would have vanished from the family. Ryan vanished completely, and Sarah stopped attending events. It seemed as though they both decided to avoid attention after realizing that their reputations could not be saved. The sans lines were now distinct. Those who supported Sarah and Ryan were revealing their true allegiances. Furthermore, I had no desire to maintain relationships with those who supported treachery. We were left with this result, even though none of us desired it. And to be honest, this was a better method. Lily was entitled to a new beginning, away from those who didn't respect her. Sarah made the decision to speak with me face to face a few days following the family gathering. It didn't surprise me. She had been making a valiant effort to improve her reputation in the family. I assumed I would be her next victim because I had been outspoken about her treachery. I was surprised when she unexpectedly showed up at my residence. I nearly shut the door in her face when I opened it and saw her standing there. "What are you looking for?" Without trying to disguise my irritation, I asked bluntly. She shook her voice and continued, "I just want to talk." She had red eyes, like if she had been sobbing. I couldn't tell, though, if it was genuine or just for show with Sarah. I hesitantly moved aside to make room for her. She sat on my couch and started crying right away, telling me how much she loved her family, how sorry she was, and how she never intended for any of this to happen. "Look, she replied, her voice shaking. I know what I did was wrong. However, I need you to comprehend. I was in a terrible situation. Ryan and I went through a really difficult divorce. He simply supported me in a manner that no one else could. I glared at her while leaning against the wall with my arms folded. So what? You were lonely, so you felt it was acceptable to start seeing your niece's boyfriend. You're using it as your justification. That wasn't the case. Her voice rose as she snapped, then caught herself. She became softer. I'm not sure how it began. Only conversing. When I needed him most, he showed me kindness. Then things became more tricky. I didn't intend for things to go this bad. I gave a sour laugh. Difficult. For 3 years, you had an affair. It's not difficult. It's a premeditated move. Let's be honest. You didn't want to stop, so you didn't. Don't pretend that you were a defenseless victim during this entire ordeal. Sarah's weeping grew more intense. She sobbed so loudly that I had to roll my eyes while she hid her face in her hands. You're not understanding, she sobbed. Everything is gone from me. I am hated by the family. Lily despises me. Ryan has also ceased communicating with me. I'm all by myself. Excellent. I was direct. After what you done, you deserve to feel isolated in the worst manner imaginable. You betrayed Lily. Now that it's finally coming up with you, you want pity. Not going to occur. As she glanced up at me with a pathetic face, her tears became sniffles. That's not what you mean. Silently, she said, we are related. I've always thought of you as a niece. I need your support. That remark infuriated me. Why should I trust you if you treat me like a niece? Your real niece, Lily, was betrayed by you. What's preventing you from taking advantage of the rest of us, if you can do that to her? She had no response to that. Rather, she began to beg. Please, 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 assist me in fixing this. I'll give Lily an apology. To all of you. All I need is someone to think I'm not a nasty guy. Whether or if you are a horrible person is not up to you, I said icily. That is defined by your behavior, which has been abhorrent. You don't have to apologize to Lily. She requires space. To be honest, I do too. Sarah changed her strategy before attempting to guilt-trip me. You are aware that this is the reason the family is disintegrating. Both grandparents are devastated. They have been sobbing over the fact that nobody wants to speak with me anymore. They've been supporting you for decades, which is why they're sobbing, I fired back. The fact that the rest of us are now able to see through the facade is too much for them to bear, and you are their golden child, she squinted. Don't you think you're so morally upright? In your whole life, you have never committed a mistake. I acknowledge that I've made errors, but I've never deceived a person who trusted me. What you did is far different from making a mistake. Sarah alternated between sobbing, begging, and attempting to place the blame during the almost hour-long chat. She even accused Lily of exaggerating at one point. You know, Lily isn't flawless. She said that she and Ryan had been at odds for years. Perhaps he wouldn't have resorted to me if she had been a better girlfriend. That was the last straw. Leave, I said, in a forceful but hushed voice. What? She said, with a sincere air of surprise. I pointed to the door and said, you heard me. Now leave my apartment. Slowly, she got to her feet. She began to cry once again. That's not how I meant it. I'm only attempting to clarify. You're attempting to defend the irrational. I cut you off. You've been making excuses the entire time, pointing the finger at everyone but yourself, and hoping that because we're related, I'll forgive you. But you know what? The way you handled Lily is not how family members treat one another. I'm done, so go weep to someone else. I had a range of emotions as she departed. I felt a twinge of rage. I'm upset that she believed she could influence me to forgive her. She refused to accept genuine responsibility for her conduct, which infuriated me. However, I also felt a sense of relief. I knew for the first time that I owed her nothing. Sarah was now having to deal with the repercussions of her behavior. Making her feel better about what she had done was not my duty, nor was it my responsibility to clean up her mess. I contacted Lily later that night to let her know about the altercation. She listened silently as I told her all about it, and she laughed bitterly when I was done. "Typical Sarah," she remarked, constantly focusing on herself. She attempted to claim that you and Ryan were having issues, as if it justified anything. I muttered, still in a rage. Lily let out a sigh. "To be honest, I no longer give a damn about her opinion. The reality remains the same, regardless of how she chooses to present it. The only thing that counts is that she is no longer in my life." I couldn't agree with you more. No amount of tears or justifications could mend the damage Sarah had caused to all the bridges. I felt lighter at the end of the night. Having to face Sarah had been exhausting. However, it strengthened my commitment as well. I refused to be manipulated by her, and I refused to allow her to change the story to make herself appear to be the victim. Lily deserved to be supported by others, not the kind of individuals who would ignore treachery. Sarah was in for a surprise if she believed she could use shame to regain our affections. Loyalty was not the only factor here. It was about doing the right thing. And for the first time in a long time, I thought the family was beginning to realize that it was time to move on from all that had transpired, including Sarah's treachery, Lily's anguish, and the family's split. That's what I kept telling myself, anyhow. In actuality, though, the consequences of their deeds continued to hang over all those concerned, like a threatening cloud. The path ahead was particularly challenging for Lily. She made the decision to leave her parents' home. She rented a tiny apartment near her workplace and poured herself into her career and interests because she wanted a new beginning away from the memories of Ryan and the incessant talk about Sarah. While Lily was healing herself, Sarah had almost disappeared from family get-togethers. She appeared to understand that most people were no longer accepting her justifications after our encounter. As additional information about her romance with Ryan surfaced, even her most ardent supporters, including my grandparents, began to back off. Their relationship turned out to be more than a string of sporadic encounters. Sarah had been aggressively courting Ryan, seeing him behind closed doors at family gatherings, and even mailing him presents. Ethan, Lily's brother, was furious to learn about this. She concealed her affair by using family get-togethers. During a phone call, Ethan yelled. She didn't just turn on Lily. We were all fooled by her. I was unable to dispute that. The more we discovered about Sarah's actions, the more evident it became that she just cared about herself. Ryan, on the other hand, completely vanished. Through a friend, Lily's father learned that he had relocated out of town, perhaps to escape the criticism. Goodbye. I informed Lily that he was now someone else's concern. But there was a peculiar emptiness in Ryan's absence. He had been by Lily's side often at family gatherings for years. His name was now all but prohibited, a reminder of the suffering he had brought about. Nor did the family's split go away quickly. Even though my grandparents continued to try to mediate the situation, it simply got worse. During a family call, my grandma stated that we must forgive Sarah. Despite everything she's been through, she is still family. She's experienced a lot. Lily's mother lost her temper. Are her sentiments really more important to you than the person she harmed? It's a blessing that anyone is talking to her at all. With neither party prepared to compromise, the call ended suddenly. The family would never be the same. It was obvious. And to be honest, I didn't mind that. One of the few individuals who had supported me from the beginning over coffee one day was my sister Emma. She expressed her pride in my handling of things. She responded, "You didn't let them intimidate you. Even though it was difficult, you stood up for what was right. It takes courage to do it. Regards," I said. But I had a nagging doubt. I only wish there hadn't been so much animosity. Emma gave a head shake. There was already that separation. You just made it public. Families aren't broken by people like Sarah. They just expose the pre-existing fissures. Months passed before I recognized I needed the sense of closure her comments provided. The family gradually adapted to the new normal. Sarah continued to live on the periphery, occasionally making contact with others, but never really mending the connections she had ruined. Lily, however, was doing quite well, and we are currently at that point. Story 3. She cheated with my best friend and my business partner is the title of this article. In order to leave them with nothing, I played stupid and exacted my nuclear retribution. Hello everyone. It took me a long time to locate these stories for you. Please click the subscribe button if you like the article. It keeps this adventure going strong and means the world. Together, let's develop. Let's begin the video now. OP begins by stating that I am a 42-year-old guy who built the life I have always dreamt of by pouring blood, sweat, and sleepless nights into it. The one with the plan has always been me. Every decision I make and every risk I take is well thought out. I've worked hard to build my family, my business, and my reputation. And I was proud to be the one with everything together. I met my wife, Lisa, 15 years ago. She was the type of lady whose grin could brighten any space. She was endearing, funny, and encouraging. I thought so. When we were married, I felt like I had struck gold. John, who has been my best buddy since college, came next. Together, we were a formidable team. In both work and life, I knew I could rely on John to support me. John and I created a multi-million-dollar company together. While he oversaw operations, I was in charge of the major transactions and the vision. I trusted him like a brother, and we collaborated easily. Although it wasn't flawless, life was very nearly so. However, fissures began to show. For months, Lisa had remained aloof, offering evasive justifications for her late nights and impulsive shopping trips. At first, I dismissed it. Everyone has days off after all. Then there was the occasion when she claimed to have found a diamond bracelet on sale and wore it home. Identify it as intuition. Call it paranoia. However, there was something off with her tale. John, meantime, began to behave differently. His zeal faded, and meetings slowed down. He appeared preoccupied, constantly looking at his phone while speaking. However, I attributed it to stress. Being a company owner is not easy. I assumed he simply required some room. Nevertheless, I was unable to ignore the gnawing sensation in my stomach. I had the unshakable feeling that something was going on behind my back, and my two closest confidants were behaving strangely. Then it took place. I had an idea one day when I was passing Lisa's car in the driveway. I'm not very proud of a recorder, but I wanted answers. I was completely expecting to discover nothing but innocuous chatter when I placed it beneath the driver's seat. I was mistaken, boy. I pulled out the recorder a couple of days later and hit play. Initially, it was simply regular discussions, talks on the phone with her sister, a conversation about a new yoga class with a buddy. Then I heard his voice though. John. They were discussing me with each other. Lisa remarked, her voice brimming with annoyance. Henry is so controlling. He presents himself as the world's ruler. And all I have to do is be thankful to be in his dominion. I understand, John said. Does he not pay attention? He is always devoted to his work and striving for excellence. It seems as though he no longer even sees you. Yes, I am aware. I occasionally ponder what my life could have been like if I had found someone like you. I went cold. I felt as though my heart may explode from the force of its hammering. My wife, and my closest friend were discussing me as if I were some ignorant despot. And John, the man I put my life in his hands, he was sowing doubtful seeds and fostering it. Although they didn't explicitly state it, it was obvious that they were having an affair. Something existed between them that was inappropriate for either my friendship or my marriage. They also believed that I was too blind to see. Something changed inside of me at that time. I felt angry, in addition to being hurt. Behind my back, these two individuals who were closest to me were plotting. They underestimated me, but they believed they could get away with it. Anna, Icarus made a big mistake. Betrayal doesn't happen once. You get eaten away by the gradual burn. I sat in my home office, in a state of shock after listening to the audio. I was really taken aback by Lisa's and John's treachery. I listened to the exchange a dozen times, carefully analyzing each word. The more I heard, the more I realized how dishonest they were. I attempted to talk sense into my head. It could just be harmless venting. John could simply be being a nice buddy. But I knew better in my heart. John's fast agreement and the way she talked about me. It wasn't a harmless thing. It was planned. I wore this burden like a lead vest for days. It felt like a smack in the face each time I saw Lisa. She would pretend to be the devoted wife and give me a farewell kiss in the morning. And the only thing on my mind was how she had told John. My blood boiled at the memory of John. He had joined me in celebrating my greatest victories. He was the one who stood with me during my wedding. What? Undermining me, emotionally abusing my wife, or worse. I did not immediately approach them. I wasn't prepared. Rather, I watched. And believe me when I say that once you become skeptical, you begin to notice things that you were previously unaware of. Lisa had made it a practice to leave the house for nebulous reasons, such as going to yoga, running errands, or meeting up with friends. Every justification felt like a lie today, even though I had never questioned it before. She claimed to have been at a wine tasting with her sister one evening when she arrived home late. Instead of wine, she smelled like perfume. I kept my mouth shut, even though I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. John began to stay away from me. Meetings that had previously lasted for hours were abruptly interrupted. He avoided emails and phone calls, saying he was too busy with work. The justifications were feeble. Once, this was the man who flourished under duress. The man who could make a sale while blind. He was no longer able to meet my gaze. When Lisa brought up John's upcoming business trip, it was the tipping point. John mentioned that he has a significant client meeting in Chicago the following week. Over dinner, she mentioned in passing. In midair, my fork froze. As his business partner, John had not mentioned this trip to me at all. I ought to have discovered it first. I realized then that something more profound was happening. They were lying to me, and I wasn't going to let the coincidences get the better of me. I made the decision to take action. I'm a careful person. That's how I developed my company. I thus handled this treachery in the same manner as I would a hostile takeover. I began strategically recording everything. A number of transactions that didn't add up were discovered when I went over Lisa's credit card accounts, hotel stays, top quality restaurants, spa treatments she never mentioned. Then I shifted my attention to John. I started paying more attention to his work habits, or lack thereof. I observed he was ignoring critical accounts and failed to follow through on deals. It was as if he'd tuned out totally. I also began quietly inquiring around, reaching out to common acquaintances and co-workers to judge his conduct. The reaction was unanimous. Something was odd with John. The resistance came when I managed to retrieve erased texts from Lisa's phone. Don't ask me how. It wasn't quite legal, but desperate times call for desperate methods. The texts confirmed my greatest suspicions. John had sent flirtatious texts, late-night conversations that included inside jokes, and even a mention of a memorable weekend they had spent together. Despite my want to hurl her phone across the room, I maintained my cool. I would be acting out of pure emotion if I addressed her right now. In order to be sure that neither Lisa nor John could back out of this, I needed a strategy. I wasn't going to face them head-on. Piece by piece, I was going to tear down their little charade. I once looked up at the ceiling while Lisa slept next to me. My thoughts are racing. I came to a critical realization. The treachery wasn't the only thing at stake. It has to do with power. John and Lisa believed they were ahead. They believed they could manipulate me, keep me in the dark, and play me. However, they underestimated me. The storm that was building under the surface was invisible to them. I made the decision not to face them directly. I would demolish them. There was more to this than retaliation. Regaining control of my life and ensuring that they could never do this again were the goals. Patience is crucial. If that's one thing I've learned in the business world, someone's defenses are lowered when they underestimate you. When they make a mistake, you hit them. John and Lisa believed they had me tricked, and I gave them a bit more time to believe that. They were unaware that every action they took was supporting my strategy. I began with the company. John had great satisfaction in his role inside the corporation, which also served as the basis for his salary. I was fortunate that I insisted on owning the majority of the business when we first started it. John has never been a quarrelsome person. After all, the early financial risks were taken by me. That choice was now going to pay off. I started silently interrupting him. I began by rerouting offers to important team members and myself first. I made direct contact with clients, fostering closer ties and making sure John's participation was rendered moot. I then started an audit. I wasn't shocked to discover a few dubious charges under the pretense that John managed to streamline processes in order to locate any disparities in the accounts. I was able to officially end John's partnership because of his careless financial management. I wasn't going to shoot, though. Not yet. I wanted him to feel safe before pulling the rug out from under him because timing was important. Lisa was more difficult to deal with. I couldn't just show her the tapes and texts. She had to dig her own grave for me. So I began to pretend to be the loyal, naive spouse. Romantic meals, unexpected presents, even a weekend vacation. In the end, she believed that I was only attempting to mend our troubled marriage. She had no idea that I was recording anything. Her responses, her justifications, and her falsehoods. I engaged a private investigator as well. I needed concrete proof if Lisa was skulking about. As expected, the Pi sent me a folder containing pictures of Lisa and John meeting at a posh hotel within a week. The dates of her alleged wine nights coincided with the timestamps, and the Pi found something that made me even more angry. John had been scheduling these meetings with business money. They were betraying me more than just myself. With every bit of proof that they were stealing from the company I had established, I felt more in charge. I had everything I needed by the time I finished. John and Lisa exchanged flirtatious and innuendo-filled text conversations, pictures of their covert meetings, unquestionable and time-stamped, financial documents demonstrating John's misappropriation of business cash, a record of Lisa's mysterious expenditures, which I knew would be useful in the divorce proceedings. However, I wasn't yet prepared to face them. I wished for their safety, to believe they had escaped punishment. I did my part so perfectly that Lisa even returned to her loving behavior. I maintained my poker face, even though it made my skin crawl. When Lisa stated that John wanted to join us for dinner, it was the ideal moment. Her voice was full of phony worry as she remarked, "He thinks we've been drifting apart. He is concerned about your well-being." I nearly burst out laughing. These two were nearly astounding in their daring. Knowing that today would be the night I lay the last trap, I accepted the supper. We went to a classy restaurant to meet. It's the sort of location where bookings must be made weeks in advance. Lisa was radiant, wore clothing that was obviously designed to make an impression on John. He flashed his typical arrogant grin and arrived late as usual. As the generous host, I chuckled at their antics and raised a glass to friendship. They were unaware that I had previously informed the restaurant employees. Every word and gesture, as the wine poured, was recorded by the covert cameras and microphones installed on our table. They settled in. Also, cozy. At one point, Lisa leaned over to John and said something in a whisper that I couldn't hear, but I could tell everything I needed to know from his smirk. Even though I was seated right there, these two were still engaged in their little game. I watched the video that night as Lisa slept next to me. It was sufficient to demonstrate their treachery, even though it wasn't as damning as the letters or the urine pictures. I had an airtight case when you included everything else. I presented my strategy to my lawyer when we met the next day. We created the divorce documents that detailed the prenuptial agreement that would leave Lisa with very little. Citing John's financial misdeeds, we also started the process of firing him from the organization. Everything was ready. The encounter was all that remained. I was prepared to provide the performance of a lifetime. I assure you, I was prepared for the day of reckoning. Everything was planned. Each piece of evidence is presented in detail. Confronting Lisa and John wasn't the only goal here. Making them understand the full consequences of their treachery was the goal. I had more in mind than simply exposing them. I was determined to destroy the cozy lifestyles they had established based on my confidence. Under the guise of a business meeting, I invited John over. Unaware that the walls were closing in, Lisa was already at home, relaxing in the living room. John arrived, looking dapper, and his arrogance as annoying as ever. He shook my hand firmly and greeted Lisa and myself both heartily, the sort intended to foster camaraderie. He smiled like the serpent he was, saying, "Big things happening. You might say that." I answered in a neutral tone. In the living room, the three of us took a seat. Being the polite hostess, Lisa poured wine for everyone. Unaware of the maelstrom that was building around him, John started a little conversation about possible clients. Although I was secretly counting down the seconds until I could drop the hammer, I nodded along with him, as though I was interested in what he was saying. "John," I eventually interrupted him in the middle of his statement. "Are you aware of the reason I invited you here today?" Unexpectedly, he blinked. In order to discuss the new contracts, I studied him, leaning back in my chair. "I believe it's time for us to have an open discussion about both personal and professional issues, which is why I invited you here." Lisa moved uneasily, her gaze flitting between us. "Henry, what's this about?" I continued to look at John, ignoring her. "John, you have been deceiving me." His face has lost its color, and so have you both. "What are you discussing?" "Oh, don't act foolish," I remarked icily. "Do you believe I am unaware of the two of you? The hotel rooms, the texts, the private encounters. John, you have been betraying me, as a buddy as well as a business associate." Lisa's wineglass broke on the floor after slipping out of her grasp. "Hold on, Henry. I can clarify." "No." I interrupted her with a snap. "You've spoken long enough. It's my time now." I grabbed the folder that I had made. I threw the printed screenshots onto the coffee table and took out the first piece of evidence, the text messages. "Do you recognize these, Lisa? You have these tiny late-night chats, John. The ones where you say that life would be much better without me, and how domineering I am." John groped for the papers, his hands shaking. "This isn't what it appears to be." "Yes, that's precisely how it seems." I cut you off, but allow me to refresh your mind if you require further evidence. I took the private investigator's pictures and tossed them on the ground. As Lisa gazed at the pictures of her and John walking inside the boutique hotel, her face went ghostly white. "This is crazy," Lisa said. "I've been the target of your surveillance. Is it spying?" I gave a sour laugh. "No, Lisa. His wife and best friend stabbed him in the back while I was doing what any male would do. I collected proof." John's voice was unsteady as he fought to recover. "Listen, Henry, I was wrong. I had no intention of it getting this far, so far," I murmured, looming over him as I stood. "You didn't intend to have an affair with my wife while financing your little adventures with business funds. John, tell me, what aspect of this wasn't deliberate?" I changed course before they could react. "Speaking of business, finances, and John, let's discuss the audit." Panic enlarged his eyes. "Which audit?" "It revealed hundreds of dollars in unapproved spending." I tossed another folder on the table and muttered that. "Would you mind explaining why hotel stays, meals, and spa services were paid for with the business credit card?" "I've already spoken with my attorney. Your collaboration has ended with instant effect." "That is not possible." His voice rose in protest. "Together we created this business." "No, John," I answered in a cold tone. "This business was founded by myself. This is the end of the journey you were a part of." I finally look at Lisa. "I've already filed for divorce from you. Expect to lose a lot because the prenup is unchangeable. Additionally, I will be granted full custody of our son based on the information I've gathered. If you see him on the weekends, you'll be lucky." Lisa started crying. Please, Henry, I was wrong. I cherish you. Yes, I do. This is something we can resolve. My voice was a shake of my head. Steady. Lisa, you don't love me. I gave you a life that you adore, and life is ended now. That night, John left the home in a daze, a broken man. I packed Lisa's luggage and urged her to go, despite her entreaties. She was gone by daybreak. I didn't feel like I had won. I felt free, but not yet. All that mattered was that I had regained control over my life. When you finally take out the garbage, it's funny how quickly your life transforms. John was essentially removed from my life the day after Lisa departed. It was a feeling I hadn't had in years. Calm. Yes, there was grief, fury, and a hint of resentment. The most important thing, though, was clarity. I had broken free from the web of falsehoods, letting go of the weight of treachery. I could breathe for the first time in a long time. I started by refocusing on the business. It was evident from his absence how much John had been bringing us down. He had been dead weight for years. To assist me reorganize, I put together my team of devoted, diligent experts who had always been in the background and handed them the reins. We worked together to optimize processes, attract new customers, and even enter some unexplored industries that John had overlooked. In a few months, earnings soared. The workplace culture changed after John's poisonous influence was removed. Workers, who used to be cautious around him, now prospered. I recognized promise in people I had previously overlooked, and I gave them incentives and promotions for their efforts. The company became more inventive, leaner, and stronger than before. Lisa and I got divorced quickly and brutally. Because of the prenuptial agreement and the proof I had gathered, she took the bare minimum with her. No extravagant settlement, no alimony, just enough to survive. Even more pleased was the custody arrangement. Lisa was given visiting privileges, but I was given full custody of our kid, Ethan. Ethan swiftly adapted to the new normal. After being oblivious to the turmoil, I kept his life as secure and pleasant as I could. Lisa made many attempts to get in touch, offering her apology, begging, and even saying she wanted to start again. I refused to fall for the ruse. I no longer cared about her crocodile tears. I disregarded her number whenever it flashed on my phone. I had made my decision, and she had made hers. Without the companionship, John's decline was as quick as it was wonderful. He was a purposeless man. After I made a few discreet calls to mutual connections and let them know what type of man he was, his reputation in the industry was completely destroyed. Nobody wanted to collaborate with a dishonest ex-partner who had been exposed for financial mismanagement. I was informed by rumors that he attempted to launch a new business, but it failed in a matter of weeks. He finally had to sell his residence due to mounting debt. The last I heard, he was miles away from the high-powered life he used to lead with the poisonous people in my life, working a low-level position at a rival company. I concentrated on creating something better for Ethan as much as for myself. I began therapy to digest what I had experienced, and I engaged a life coach to help me realign my objectives. Although it wasn't simple, every session seemed like removing another layer of the suffering they had inflicted. In addition, I began scheduling the things I had put off during my marriage. For the first time in years, I resumed playing golf, made new acquaintances, and even began working at a local organization that assists small businesses in starting up. I felt like myself once more. I met someone fresh 6 months after everything had calmed down. She's a lady that exudes warmth and generosity, and her name is Natalie. I was immediately impressed by her genuineness when we met at a casual dinner gathering through mutual acquaintances. She didn't care about my wealth or social standing. I was accepted for who I was by her. We took our time getting to know one another at first, and as time went on, I came to see that not all relationships are based on deceit and manipulation. A few months into our relationship, Natalie met Ethan, and they clicked right away. Seeing them grow closer served as a reminder that no matter how chaotic life becomes, it always manages to catch you off guard. In retrospect, I'm thankful for the wake-up call. rather than the betrayal that still hurts. It gave me a call. I discovered that while you have no control over what other people do, you do have power over how you react. John and Lisa overestimated my fortitude in their attempts to shatter me. I didn't just make it through their treachery. I prospered as a result. I have my life back now. My company is doing really well. My son is content. And I've met someone who genuinely appreciates me. Even if getting revenge was nice, the true triumph was finding my serenity again and demonstrating to myself that you can always overcome adversity. The lives of John and Lisa kept falling apart, having trouble finding a job that fit her previous lifestyle. Lisa moved in with her sister. Every now and again, John, who was still struggling, sought to get in touch with me via emails that were full of vacuous excuses. I never answered. For my part, I'm doing great. Rebuilding my life was the fire that kept me going, even though retaliation may have been the spark. And now it seems like a daily reminder that the best power move of all is to get rid of poisonous individuals.